Great. So for my Zenith project, I decided to make my prom dress. So next slide.
Okay.
So I've made a couple other dresses before, and I always do it in like the same type of order because it takes a lot to like both design and make something. So you have this like weird combination of like having to think about what you're making and like create it, and it's like a very personal thing, while at the same time having to like constantly edit it and like do things over. So that's why I have this 5-step process that I use for pretty much everything that I make. So for the first one, it was like a lot of research and inspiration. So the first step, I was in San Francisco and I was trying on dresses and I was like, oh my god, this would be the perfect prom dress. It was this Mcqueen dress. I just fell in love with it. It's like so many layers of tulle. It felt beautiful on me. But then I looked at the price.
Oh my god.
$15,000.
$15,000.
So how can I do this in a way that's like budget friendly? And of course I'm not just gonna like copy the Mcqueen dress because that's just not what I do. So I looked at like different inspirations. Instagram was definitely a big part of like you know, my inspiration for this dress, and also like movies, especially like really old ones, because I like to have a combination of like femininity, masculinity, and then just also like different time periods, as you can probably see in like the different elements through the dress. So yeah, there are a lot of different inspirations for this one. Okay, so phase 2 is design and theory. So this is my sketch for the dress. It's definitely, if you can like see it, it's very different from like the end product that I ended up making, especially with like the layering and like different aspects. There are some that stay the same, like the model that I wanted to use, like the puffy skirt and things like that. I knew that like having a very defined waist and a very like outflowing skirt was something that I really wanted to do. That's just one of the things that like helps me feel, you know, like beautiful. Yeah. And then there are some questions that I always want to address, like what's appealing about my influences, like when you're borrowing like certain parts of like what you're like sort of not copying but taking away from it. You want to make sure that you're taking the right parts and incorporating them into what you're making. And like, so if you like, for instance, let's see, if you take like the Mcqueen sleeves, that Mcqueen is like very well known for, it won't work if you don't have like the right like structure to go along with it, because you can often end up with like too organic or too bulky of a look, and you need some sort of balance. So you need to make sure that the influences you're borrowing from, you like know what you're doing with them.
Ready?
Yeah, next slide. Okay, and then phase 3 is material translation. This is really important for dressmaking specifically because of like the cloth and like the specific way it moves with your body. There are a lot of things about cloth, like cutting on the bias and like the way you want to do your hems and like the lengths that you need, that are really important, specifically to like cloth and like what you're working with. Next slide. For example, my sweetheart dress, I used tulle for it, and I discovered halfway through the process that you can't iron it, which was really annoying. So I ended up with like this like sort of melted like hem for a couple parts of it. Thankfully it was like underneath the armpit area, so you couldn't really see. But that was one of the things I wanted to try to avoid, so I used organza instead of tulle this time. Also things like clasps and how you want like the things to fit. It was difficult to like sort of design how I wanted it to like get in and out, because like getting in and out of like making a dress that fits you perfectly is easy, but making a dress that fits you perfectly and you can get in and out of is very difficult, especially when you want a very defined waist. So that's one thing. Yeah, one time I had a dress held together by duct tape, so yeah. And then also like considering zippers and the materials that you need is very important. And then phase 4, physical conception. It's sort of similar to the last one, but the way that things play out in real life often don't work out the way they intended in your head, so this is a really important step. That's the next slide. So prototypes. I built 2 prototypes and I changed so many aspects of it, like throughout the whole process. At one point I wanted to have a bustle, and then there's like the collar that I wanted to change. If you notice, like a lot of the things that I wanted to change about this dress had to do with boobs because they're very difficult to fit. Like women's clothing is amazing except for the fact that you have to deal with this. It's very tough. So dressmakers out there, beware. Also things about like fitting, like how you want it to land. Like this part, I wasn't sure how like there's sort of like a V shape, but it doesn't hold that if you have like a very tight waist because there's like no weight to it. So you need to understand how like different weights and how things will like sit on your body specifically. Okay.
Okay.
So then the final part is presentation. So the last stretch is basically making it. You guys have been reading Reds, right? So like there's this part where like the main character says like, you know, it's like 90% thinking about it, right? This is just like at the point when you're actually working with the material, that's like the last step. It's like 10% of what you actually do. Like once you've created your pattern and you know what you're doing and you have what you want in mind, it's so much easier to work with your actual fabric and create things. Of course there are mishaps. I did not intend for the color to be this way, like the sort of Venetian sort of, I accidentally sewed it backwards, but then I decided I liked it, so I kept it. So yeah, things like that. Also, the attention to detail in this part, like, I was like, which one should I choose? I asked my boyfriend, which one should I choose between these? And he was like, they're the same thing. And I was like, no, they're not. Like, look at the placement of the fabric. And he was like, what are you talking about? So yeah, there are some different things you want to consider. My serger broke halfway through, so that was a big pain in the butt. If you guys don't know, it makes this very specific type of hem that like sort of protects it from fraying. So working with organza, it was very tough. I had to buy some glue in order to hold the dress together, so that's why it's not falling apart right now, is because I bought a ton of glue. And yeah, creating the dress and the skirt was, you know, it was a lot of layers and a lot of work. So just something to keep in mind before you make your dress. So thank you all for coming to my presentation. I hope you liked it, and feel free to ask me any questions.
Can you spin around and
Oh,
show
yeah.
everybody the back? The back is really cool.
Yeah, it has an open back.
And I think your collar was a happy accident. It turned out really cool.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody have any questions that you would like to ask? There's one back there.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I just want to say I really love this skirt. The part where it flares out and the color is really nice. I'm really pretty.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Doctor.
just also don't really have a question, but I wanted to mention with working with organza, that material is not fun.
Yeah, it's so slippery.
And the little lace details, it's just so cute. I love the dress. Love the way it turned out.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yeah?
So, are the top and the bottom two different pieces? So it's like a two-piece set?
Yeah, it is a two-piece set. I thought that it would just be like easier to work out. Yeah, especially like because of like the way that it works together. If you like bend over, it can be really tough with this part to keep them together. So I didn't want my skirt like completely dependent on the top.
That's really cool how you did the corset style on the top.
Thank you.
Because I just bought a sewing machine yesterday and I was like trying to play around with it. And just tell you, tops do not fit. Like boobs.
Yeah.
I was
So
like, yes,
true.
Really
yes.
You pay the price.
So that's really, really good.
Anybody else? Okay, big round of applause for August. Good job.